What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here's my fantasy football advice for NFL Week 8. Sleepers and studs. This fantasy football advice is for informational purposes only. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. Okay, in this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper and a stud for each position. And if you stay to the very end after all my picks and after I show you the Draft Dashboard tools, I'll give you my super secret sleeper pick that no one's talking about. At quarterback, I like Andrew Luck for the Indianapolis Colts facing the Oakland Raiders, who are the 5th worst defense overall and give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Andrew Luck has been on fire. He threw 4 touchdowns last game, scored 23 fantasy points, and he seems to be passing every down. Luck finally got some help in the running game from Marlon Mack, who had a huge game as well. The running game always opens up the passes down the field, so look for Andrew Luck to take advantage of this dysfunctional Raiders team here in Week 8. Okay, now for a low salary quarterback that may fly under the radar. I like Case Keenum for the Denver Broncos facing the Kansas City Chiefs, who are the 3rd worst defense overall and give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Look, Casey Keenum isn't that great, but he is capable of putting up good fantasy numbers. He only scored 10 fantasy points last game, which will surely lead to super low ownership for a guy who scored 24 and 25 fantasy points the 2 games before that. Keenum will probably be playing from behind in this game, forced to pass the ball more than run it, so the game script and the matchup bode well for Case Keenum in Week 8. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL, MLB is still going. The tools for NBA are awesome. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Okay, let's take a look at running backs. My stud running back this week is James Conner for the Pittsburgh Steelers, facing the Cleveland Browns, who are the 12th worst defense overall and give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. It doesn't look like Le'Veon Bell will be back before the trade deadline October 30th, which means James Conner will get 1 more week to shine in a game he could see a lot of action. Conner has scored 32 and 38 fantasy points in the last 2 games, with a combined 25 plus touches per game. Outstanding production from James Conner, who should be able to keep rolling here in Week 8. Now for a low salary running back. I like Chris Carson for the Seattle Seahawks, facing the Detroit Lions, who are the 9th worst defense overall and give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Carson was a letdown last week, only 6 fantasy points, which will drop his ownership way down in a game versus the Detroit Lions, who are notoriously bad for stopping the run. Hard to ignore this matchup. Look for Chris Carson to bounce back in Week 8. Okay, who do we have at wide receiver? I have to go with AJ Green for the Cincinnati Bengals facing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who are the absolute worst defense in the league and give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. This is a home game for Andy Dalton and AJ Green, who scored 22 fantasy points off of 14 targets last week. AJ Green is averaging almost 20 fantasy points per game on 10 targets per game. Almost no doubt in my mind that AJ Green will be one of the top receivers in Week 8. For my wide receiver sleeper pick, I like Chris Godwin for the Tampa Bay Bucks facing the Cincinnati Bengals, who are the 3rd worst defense overall and right around middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Godwin has enjoyed 13.3 fantasy points per game off of 6.2 targets per game. He scored 11 fantasy points on 6 targets last game and 18 fantasy points on 9 targets the game before that. Look for that production to continue for Chris Godwin in Week 8. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. My tight end stud in Week 8 is Travis Kelce for the Kansas City Chiefs facing the Denver Broncos, who give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Kelce scored 15 fantasy points off of 5 targets last week, averaging 17.3 fantasy points from 8.6 targets per game. Kelce is playing at home this week, and he looks to be the best tight end on the main slate with a reasonable price tag here in Week 8. If you need a lower priced tight end, take a look at CJ Uzomah for the Cincinnati Bengals, facing the Tampa Bay Bucks, who are the absolute worst defense in the league and give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Uzomah has stepped up the past couple of games, finding the end zone and scoring 9 fantasy points last game, and 11 in the game before that. Don't expect huge numbers from CJ, but for minimum salary, Uzomah won't need much to hit value in Week 8. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to DraftDashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. You've unlocked the bonus content. My super secret sleeper pick for Week 8 is Robbie Anderson for the New York Jets, facing the Chicago Bears, who give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Anderson is going deep almost every play. He scored 7 fantasy points in both games, following his huge 30-point outing. Anderson got 10 targets last week, so the opportunity is there for another huge game for Robbie Anderson here in Week 8. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for Week 8. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.